Imagine you are one of the most beloved candy brands on the planet. You've been around since World War II. Literal soldiers ate your product in the trenches. You went to space. You were the official snack of the Olympics. You have an entire store in Times Square. You are bulletproof. Now imagine you throw all of that away. Not because of a product recall, not because of a food safety scandal, not because your CEO embezzled money or got caught in a hotel room with someone he shouldn't be with. No. You destroy your reputation because you changed a cartoon candy's shoes. That's it. That's the story. That is actually what happened. On January 20th, 2022, Mars Incorporated, one of the largest privately held companies in the history of the world, with a net worth sitting at over $40 billion, announced a rebrand of their M&M's spokes candies. They swapped the green M&M's iconic white go-go boots for a pair of flat sneakers. They gave the brown M&M's slightly lower heels. They said it was about inclusivity. They thought no one would care. Within days, Tucker Carlson was on primetime Fox News in front of millions of viewers, screaming about whether a cartoon piece of chocolate was sexually attractive enough. By January of 2023, the brand had completely scrapped their beloved mascots, characters they had used for decades in an indefinite pause. They replaced them with Maya Rudolph, who then spent the Super Bowl hawking clam-flavored candy. The entire internet lost its mind. The left mocked the brand for cowing to right-wing pressure. The right claimed they'd just won the culture war against a bag of chocolate. Columnists wrote think pieces, universities held seminars, people filed petitions. Over candy shoes. But to understand how one of America's most iconic brands accidentally became the front line of a full-scale culture war, we have to go back, way back, to the very beginning. The year is 1932. A man named Forrest Mars Sr. has just been kicked out of his own family business. His father, Frank Mars, the man who invented the Milky Way and the Snickers bar, threw his own son out of the Mars Candy Company after a bitter falling out. So Forrest did what any scorned, ambitious son does. He went to Europe. He started making Mars bars in England. He was furious. He was hungry. He was going to build something bigger than his father ever imagined. And then, in the middle of the Spanish Civil War, something caught his eye. British soldiers were eating these little chocolate pellets encased in hard sugar coating. The sugar coating kept the chocolate from melting in the heat. No mess, no meltdown. Perfect for war. Forrest Mars watched those soldiers and something clicked in his brain like a mousetrap snapping shut. He went back to America with a plan. In 1941, he approached a man named Bruce Murray, whose father was literally the president of Hershey's Chocolate. They needed each other. Mars needed Hershey's chocolate during wartime rationing. Murray needed a new business venture. They shook hands, named the candy after their two surnames, Mars and Murray, and in March of 1941, they patented what would become one of the most iconic candies in human history, M&M's. And here's the thing. From day one, this was a war machine. After the United States entered World War II, M&M's were exclusively sold to the military, enabling the heat-resistant and easy-to-transport chocolate to be included in M&M soldiers' rations. By the end of 1944, the factory was pushing out 600,000 pounds of M&M's every single week, most of it going to the military. The marketing slogan, now 100% at war. Not enjoy a treat, not share the sweetness. 100% at war. This was a candy that launched itself into existence on the back of global conflict, which, when you think about what happens 80 years later, is almost poetic. By the time the war was over and American GIs returned home, they were hooked. And shortly after wartime quotas ended, Forrest Mars bought out Murray's shares and took sole ownership of the M&M's brand. Classic Forrest Mars. Use someone until you don't need them anymore, then cut them loose. He was a genius and an absolute shark, and those two things always traveled together. By the 1950s, M&Ms were everywhere. Mars trademarked the slogan "melts in your mouth, not in your hands" in 1954, one of the most enduring and successful advertising phrases in American business history. They started printing the little M on every candy so customers could spot the real thing. The brown bag became iconic. They were a staple of American life. Then came the characters. In 1972, Americans were introduced to the M&M brand characters, red and yellow. The red one, sarcastic and a little cruel. The yellow one, who represented the peanut M&M, lovably dumb. They became the faces of the brand, starring in commercials that people actually looked forward to watching. And for 2 decades, it worked perfectly. The brand was unstoppable. M&Ms went to space aboard NASA's first space shuttle, Columbia, in 1981, the first candy to rocket into space. In 1984, Mars paid $4 million to place M&Ms at the Los Angeles Olympics as the official snack food. Everything was untouchable. The brand was culturally embedded into the American psyche. Then came the 1990s and the green M&M. In 1997, the green M&M was introduced as a full character, and Mars, in their infinite wisdom, decided to make her the sexy one. She had those distinctive white go-go boots, long eyelashes, a certain attitude. Mars leaned into it hard. There were ads that played on her as kind of a candy vixen. People ate it up, literally and figuratively. For years, the green M&M was a pop culture figure, an internet meme, a Halloween costume, a collective shared reference point. And for nearly 27 years, nobody complained. Mars had built something extraordinary, a candy that had survived a world war, space exploration, and decades of changing American tastes. A brand with characters that felt like old friends. Billions of dollars flowing in every year, a global empire. They thought they were invincible. They were wrong. Because around 2020, someone in a boardroom, wearing a smart blazer holding a brand strategy deck they paid a consultancy $1 million to produce, looked at those characters and decided they needed to be updated, more inclusive, more relevant. They needed, in the words of their own press release, to reflect a more dynamic, progressive world. On January 20th, 2022, Mars Incorporated, one of the largest privately held companies in the history of the world, unveiled the changes to the M&M's characters. The red M&M was less bossy. The orange M&M's anxiety was being embraced. The yellow M&M was leaning into his sweet nature. Fine, nobody cared. But then they got to the women. The green M&M's gold go-go boots were swapped for a pair of flat sneakers, and the brown M&M's stilettos were switched to lower heels. The changes the company described as an effort to make the characters more relevant and inclusive. That's it. That's the change. Sneakers instead of boots. Now, the internet reacted immediately. And here's the fascinating thing. Both sides hated it. The left said it was patronizing. Why does female empowerment require a cartoon candy to wear flat shoes? Are we saying heels aren't feminist? The right said it was corporate pandering. When I eat a bag of M&Ms, do I wonder which color and shape best represents my identity? No, because it's fucking chocolate, Fox News host Greg Gutfeld almost immediately said. Nobody asked for this. Mars's own customers didn't ask for this. Women didn't march in the streets demanding sensible footwear on their chocolate. Nobody woke up and said, "You know what my life is missing? A less sexy candy." But then came Tucker Carlson. And this is where a minor internet moment turned into a genuine culture earthquake. On January 20th, 2022, Tucker Carlson devoted a segment of his primetime Fox News show, the most watched non-sports cable program in America, to ranting about the M&M makeover. Not a joke segment, not a quick aside, a full, committed, earnest rant. M&Ms will not be satisfied until every last cartoon character is deeply unappealing and totally androgynous, until the moment you wouldn't want to have a drink with any of them. That's the goal. When you're totally turned off, we've achieved equity. Now, you have 2 options here if you're Mars. Option 1, you ignore it. You let a cable news host yell into the void. Your candy sells fine. Nobody changes their purchase decisions based on Tucker Carlson's opinions on cartoon footwear. You say nothing, the news cycle moves on, and in 48 hours the internet has already moved to the next outrage. Option 2 is you panic. You make statements, you try to defend a decision about sneakers on a cartoon piece of chocolate. You draw more attention to yourselves. You turn a 2-day story into a year-long saga. Mars chose option 2. They put out statements about the importance of inclusivity. They doubled down on the rebrand. This fed the story, which fed more coverage, which fed more outrage, which fed more coverage. A perfect self-perpetuating engine of manufactured controversy, and Mars was standing right in the middle of it pouring gasoline. But they weren't done making bad decisions, not even close. In September 2022, Mars introduced a brand new M&M character.
The first new spokes candy in over a decade, and she was purple. The purple M&M was meant to be the peacekeeper, but it sparked more controversy. Since she was introduced as a peanut M&M, naturally a more oblong shape, people accused the brand of making a statement about being inclusive of plus-sized individuals. Purple was voiced by comedian Amber Ruffin. She had a song. She had a whole campaign. Mars was going bigger, not smaller. Then, in January 2023, Mars launched a limited edition packaging campaign ahead of International Women's Day. It was the first time M&M's packaging had solely featured its female characters, and the initiative aimed to celebrate women everywhere who are flipping the status quo. Money from the sale of the packages was donated to female-focused charities. Genuinely not a bad idea. Donate to charities, celebrate women, great. Except Tucker Carlson was still watching. On January 13, 2023, he returned. Carlson devoted another segment to a rant about the new promotional wrapper featuring the 3 female candy characters, green, brown, and the newly introduced purple. Woke M&Ms have returned, Carlson declared on his show. The green M&M got her boots back, but apparently is now a lesbian, maybe. And there's also a plus-sized, obese purple M&M, so we're going to cover that, of course, because that's what we do. Where did the lesbian thing come from? It came from a widely mocked 2015 tweet from the brand showing the green character with the brown M&M, captioned, "It's rare Ms. Brown and I get to spend time together without some colorful characters barging in." That's it. That's the evidence. A tweet from 2015, a playful caption. Tucker Carlson, in 2023, was using this as proof that the green M&M was in a secret lesbian relationship. And then, other voices piled on. A right-wing commentator named Nick Adams took to social media to declare Mars, the company behind M&Ms, launched a nuclear strike in the war on men by unveiling a package with only the female M&Ms. This is sexist and not inspirational at all. We must boycott M&Ms until the alpha male M&Ms get their own exclusive package. The alpha male M&Ms needed their own package? Over 20,000 people signed an online petition to keep the green M&Ms sexy. One right-wing pundit claimed that the brand's inclusivity campaign emboldened China. And somewhere inside Mars's corporate headquarters, someone was staring at their laptop screen, watching all of this, thinking, how did we get here? How did a company with an 80-year legacy, a company that survived a world war, a company that sent candy to space, how did they end up here? The answer is simple. They tried to win a culture war they were never equipped to fight. Because here's the cruel irony nobody was saying loudly enough at the time. While Mars was getting roasted for cartoon shoes and candy shapes, while America was having a full national debate about the sexuality of animated chocolate, Mars and Nestle and Hershey were sitting in the middle of a lawsuit that made all of this look completely insane by comparison. In 2021, 8 Malian citizens brought a lawsuit against Hershey, Nestle, Mars, Cargill, Mondelez International, Barry Callebaut, and Olam in the US for alleged child labor on Ivory Coast cocoa farms.
The plaintiffs, 8 former child slaves from Mali, claimed they were trafficked into Ivory Coast to work long hours on cocoa farms with no salary, inadequate food, and hazardous working conditions. The plaintiffs were put to work performing hazardous tasks such as using sharp machetes to cut down cocoa pods, clearing brush, applying pesticides and herbicides with no protective gear, and carrying heavy loads, all classified as the worst forms of child labor by the International Labor Organization. And if you think that's a one-off, a one-time scandal, no. Back in 2001, members of the cocoa industry, including Mars and Hershey, signed the Harkin-Engel Protocol, an agreement to eliminate abusive child labor in cocoa production by 2005. Despite this promise, the deadline was pushed back again and again. The companies now promised to reduce child labor by 70% by 2025, 20 years later than the original deadline. The Washington Post revealed that Nestle and Mars could only trace 49% and 24% of their cocoa back to its sources, respectively. Let that sink in. A company that cannot trace the origins of 3/4 of its own cocoa supply was simultaneously launching campaigns about inclusion and female empowerment, and the world was debating the shoes. Nobody talks about the shoes and the lawsuit in the same breath because the shoes were funnier. The shoes were a perfect culture war football. The lawsuit was just depressing and complicated and difficult. And Mars knew exactly which conversation they were going to get. But even understanding all of that, what they did next was still the single most bizarre corporate decision since New Coke. January 23rd, 2023, a Monday morning. M&M's posted something to their social media that immediately breaks the internet. America, let's talk. Those are the opening words, an actual candy brand starting a statement with America, let's talk, like they're your therapist, like they're about to sit you down and explain why the family dog had to go to a farm upstate. In the last year, we've made some changes to our beloved spokes candies. We weren't sure if anyone would even notice, and we definitely didn't think it would break the internet. But now we get it. Even a candy's shoes can be polarizing, which was the last thing M&M's wanted since we're all about bringing people together. And then they dropped the bombshell. The spokes candies, red, yellow, green, brown, orange, and the new purple were being placed on an indefinite pause. Gone. Off the air. Done. And in their place, Maya Rudolph, the actress and comedian. She would be the new face of M&M's. They called her a spokesperson America can agree on. The internet didn't know whether to laugh, scream, or call a mental health professional. Let's count the reactions, because they came fast and they came from every direction. Tucker Carlson, watching from his studio, essentially declared victory. He had spent over a year ranting about candy shoes, and now the candy company had blinked. The woke mascots were canceled. He had won. He posted a clip to social media with text reading, "Our response to the end of the obese and lesbian M&M spokes candies. No humility, no nuance, pure triumphalism. A man genuinely celebrating the cancellation of cartoon candy." The irony was almost too perfect. Carlson, who spends much of his time telling viewers he's a champion of victims of cancel culture, had waged a culture war campaign against the candies until they were literally canceled. Skittles, owned by the same parent company, Mars Wrigley, tweeted, "Our thoughts go out to the spokes candies." That single tweet generated millions of impressions. Skittles was dunking on its own corporate sibling in real time. It was chaos. Progressive voices were furious at Mars for what they saw as capitulating to right-wing bullying. Critics pointed out that the company was essentially admitting Tucker Carlson had the power to dictate the mascot strategy of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And then there was the further bombshell, Maya Rudolph. Here's what Mars thought they were doing by choosing Maya Rudolph. They thought they were picking someone charming, funny, universally beloved, a comedian, someone America could agree on. Here's what they missed. Rudolph is a biracial woman who has fundraised for Kamala Harris, not to mention portraying the vice president on Saturday Night Live, and is associated with other Democrats who are routinely the subject of Carlson's ire. One marketing expert noted, If you wanted to avoid being labeled woke or lefty, why not go with someone more moderate? With all due respect to Maya Rudolph, why her? They replaced their too woke mascots with someone Tucker Carlson's audience considered even more politically coded. The crisis consultants were watching this with their heads in their hands. Crisis consultant Stephen Fink put it bluntly, "There's an old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it." I suggest they make it a permanent pause. They should go back to doing whatever they were doing before because nobody was paying any attention to it until they started this nonsense. And it kept going because now everyone on the internet was waiting for the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, February 12th, 2023, one of the most watched television events in American history, an event where a 30-second commercial slot costs $7 million. M&M's had a plan. And honestly, whatever you think about how they got there, the plan was kind of brilliant in a completely absurd way. Maya Rudolph appeared in a teaser ad pitching a brand new M&M's product, Ma and Ya's candy-coated clam bites. Clam-flavored candy, presented with complete deadpan sincerity. People on screen biting into them and making faces of horrified disgust. The internet reacted with the same confused energy it had been throwing at M&M's for a year. Was this real? Was this a joke? Were the M&M's okay? One person asked on Twitter, "Are the M&M's okay?" Another, "Help me understand the M&M's clam Super Bowl ad. Seriously, help me." And then, after the Super Bowl game ended, after the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Philadelphia Eagles, M&M's dropped the follow-up. The spokes candy staged a press conference to announce their return. "I can't believe we were actually put on pause," the red M&M said, standing atop the press conference table. "This is what I was made for," said the purple M&M. "I mean, as a walking, talking candy, my options are pretty limited," added the orange M&M. The whole thing, from January 20th, 2022 to February 12th, 2023, had been a masterclass in manufacturing free media coverage. Or had it? Because here's where the analysis gets genuinely complicated. Yes, Mars generated enormous coverage, billions of free impressions. Their Super Bowl ad was discussed for weeks. By some measures, the indefinite pause announcement alone got the brand more media coverage than any paid campaign could have bought. But at what cost? As one marketing professor put it, the campaign failed to address that initial claim from the company that the spokes candies were too polarizing, which many saw as a capitulation to those who accused the brand of being too woke. They spent a year telling America their mascots needed to be more inclusive. Then they turned around and said those same mascots were too polarizing. Then they brought them back and said they were back for good. What message did that send? That you can pressure a company with viral outrage and they'll fold? That mascots can be canceled and uncanceled based on cable news coverage? That the entire inclusive rebrand was just a marketing stunt that Mars was willing to abandon the second it became inconvenient? And while all of this was happening, that lawsuit, the one about child labor on cocoa farms in the Ivory Coast, was still sitting in federal court. 8 former child slaves seeking justice against some of the most powerful companies in the world. Critics on the left pointed out the brutal irony. While Mars was promoting inclusivity through candy shoes, they were simultaneously being sued over child labor practices in their cocoa supply chain. And America kept talking about the shoes. The right was celebrating. The left was furious. The press was printing endless takes. Everyone had an opinion about a candy mascot's footwear. Tucker Carlson had turned a boring corporate rebrand into a proxy war for America's cultural soul. And Mars, instead of staying quiet, instead of waiting it out, instead of treating the whole thing with the contempt it deserved, kept engaging, kept responding, kept fueling it. They handed their most powerful critics exactly what those critics needed, an enemy. And then, in a twist that absolutely nobody expected, the story got worse. Not for Mars, for Tucker Carlson. Because in April of 2023, Tucker Carlson was fired from Fox News. The man who had waged a year-long personal campaign against cartoon candy shoes, whose face was the engine of the entire M&M's culture war, was gone. Dismissed, unceremoniously dumped by the same network he'd made billions of dollars for. And the M&Ms? They were still there. The spokes candies, still wearing their updated shoes, melting in your mouth, not in your hands, outlasted the man who tried to destroy them. So, where does this leave us? Let's take stock of what actually happened here, because it's easy to get lost in the absurdity of the story and miss what it actually means. A candy company, worth tens of billions of dollars, looked at a culture that was increasingly divided and raw and angry, a culture searching for meaning and identity in every corner of public life, and decided the right move was to wade into that swamp with a rebrand. They weren't doing it because their candy tasted different. They weren't doing it because their characters were offensive. They did it because some marketing executive convinced a boardroom full of executives that being inclusive would make them look cool, would capture a new generation of consumers, would generate positive press and loyal customers. What they actually did was hand a cable news host the perfect weapon. Tucker Carlson wasn't angry about shoes. He was never angry about shoes. He is a man who gets paid very, very well to find symbols of cultural change that his audience already resents and to make those symbols radioactive. He's done it with coffee cups. He's done it with football players kneeling. He's done it with light beer. The M&M shoes were perfect. They were trivial enough to be funny. They were corporate enough to be cynical. And they were attached to something everyone knew and had a nostalgic connection to. He could make his audience feel that even their candy, even the little sugar pieces they've been eating since childhood, had been taken from them by the relentless march of woke culture. It was brilliant political theater, and Mars walked straight into it. Because here's the brutal truth about what corporate woke-washing almost always is. It's not justice, it's not activism, it's marketing. It's a company looking at the cultural moment, deciding which side seems most profitable to be seen supporting, and executing accordingly. There's no conviction behind it. There's no philosophy. There's a PowerPoint deck and a Q4 target. And the moment it becomes inconvenient, the moment it costs more than it earns, they fold. Which is exactly what Mars did. They folded. They called their own values polarizing. They retreated. They brought back the characters with the same updated shoes, hoping everyone had forgotten what the fuss was about. And for the most part, people forgot. The news cycle moved on. M&Ms are still selling billions of units a year. The spokes candies came back, wearing their new shoes, melting in your mouth, not in your hands. And somewhere in West Africa, children are still working cocoa farms for no salary, with machetes, with no protective gear, making the chocolate that goes inside those little sugar shells. But hey, at least the green M&M has comfortable shoes.